start with you now,
yeah.
And then afterward you will speak for 45 minutes, and then we will have a question about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will continue with Dr. Iyad. So please, the floor is yours.
Please give me sharing.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So Iyad will share the PowerPoint, and I will talk. And hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us. So my topic today is the German policy of reconciliation after World War II. I will give you an overview about the process with selected relationships. So next, please. So the starting point for Germany after 1945 was very bad. As you know, they had lost 2 world wars, and they had as well, there were a brutally nationalistic ideology of the Nazis ruling in Germany, who were committed genocides against Jews and against Sinti and Roma, so-called gypsies. And after all, everything was destroyed in the country. So Germany's reputation was at 0 or less. Maybe the next slide. So this is a picture of Jena. This is the main church. It was completely destroyed. And the next is also Jena. Next, please. So next. So here you see, and so where every German city was a bit like this, only a few exceptions. So what I will present now you first for joint relationships. So the overview is there are 2 books which are interesting for this overview. Maybe the PowerPoint seems to be a bit unstable. Could you?
Excuse me, Professor Martin, before you continue, بدي بس أوضح I want to just explain for our colleagues who want to listen for ريما إنه اللي بده يسمع للترجمة لو سمحتوا، يعني في ناس لحد الآن بيحكوا لي إنه مش سامعين الترجمة. بس عشان نوضح إنه بتختار من هاي الإشارة شكل الكرة الأرضية، وفي تعليمات وضعتها ريما على الشات كمان. بس كمان لازم أوضح لريما إنه صوت الترجمة تقريبا مش مسموع. ما بعرف إذا سمعتنا ريما ولا لا. يعني
ريما تقدري ريما لو سمحتي بس يكون صوتك أوضح، تقربي على الميكروفون لأنه الصوت الترجمة مش كتير واضح. أحسن. كمان شوي برضو.
وبالنسبة للزملاء لازم تختار اللغة الفرنسية فرنش عشان تسمع للترجمة، والأفضل تعمل ميوت للأوريجينال أوديو.
هيك أوضح.
So can I continue?
You can continue.
Thank you very much. So I will refer to 2 books, both written in America. One is called Learning from the Germans. It's about the German working through of history. And the other book is an overview, Germany's foreign policy of reconciliation. Next, please. So there is, according to the first book, the Susan Neyman, Learning from the Germans, there is a special hopeful message in the German experience of working off or working through the Nazi history. It took long, and it was not very much clear that it will work in the beginning, but finally changed the country until welcoming 1 million Syrian refugees. And even after there have been protests by right-wing people, even the people who actively supported refugees, so actively who did something, were 90%. So it's a huge amount in the German society who also actively supported these refugees, and this was a big change. And she says, so this is can be an inspiration for the US southern states how to overcome racism, because in the US there was also this racism, and there were very strong racial laws until some 50 years ago, and there was also, according to her, the election of Trump was something like a revenge for Obama as the first black person becoming president. And she says if the US would have worked off slavery and racism and really have learned something from this process and how much it is opposed to the values of the country and to democracy, this would not have happened. This is her thesis, so she wants to present the German case as an example, and I think she makes good points in this book. Next slide. And Lily Gardner Feldman is a political scientist, and she shows that reconciliation was a continuous concern in West German foreign policies since 49. 49 was the foundation of Germany. Before 49, Germany was occupied and it was not a state. So the word reconciliation, she shows, often appears in declaration and speeches of politicians, and there was often responsibility and realism as guiding values behind it. She also shows, and everybody is convinced, that the German unification would have happened if there would not have been this policy of reconciliation, because the other powers who could have a say on it, like Russia or the US or France or Great Britain, would not have liked to have a unified Germany as a powerful country in Europe. And one very typical thing is that there's a contribution always of both, of the German civil society in a bottom-up process, with many organizations very active for reconciliation, and by politicians who made it so effective and sustainable, because they both work together and in the same direction. So next slide, please. So Lily Gardner Feldman makes also an assessment according to the following parameters: confrontation with history, whether the leadership was engaged in the reconciliation, so presidents or ministers, then the society, how active it was, then official institution, whether they worked on it and or were founded in it. And then there was global support, yes or no, and the EU integration, whether it played in favor for the process. So she only looks at these parameters, these 6 parameters, and then she says in relationship with France, confrontation with history was not so strong, but leadership was very active and society. And with the Czech Republic, for example, history was especially strong, and also European integration. So there were some different weights in the processes of reconciliation, but everywhere they were active. And I added also an assessment. So today, the appreciation is that the reconciliation processes with Poland and Czech Republic are still going, but they are in a certain crisis, also because of the governments in those countries. And with France and Israel, it seems quite settled. So next slide, please. So now I come to the first example, to the German-French reconciliation. There was a strong French initiative, not a German, but a French initiative already during the war. And it was a huge Catholic peace organization, which was founded in 1944. So the war ended in 45. So in 44, by a French lady, Madame Dortel-Clodeau, and the bishop from the region where she lived, Bishop Theas, who started a prayer crusade for Germany and wanted to pray that Germany found the Catholic faith again. And what came out was a very impressive peace work, which is still alive and very active even now worldwide. Also in Palestine, they are working, and now they are considered more as leftist and pro-Palestinian, very much. Pax Christi, their starts, however, were quite conservative and quite spiritual. And then there were also important moments which came from France, that de Gaulle, who was French president, he had the idea that, here's a photo, got de Gaulle and Adenauer, but de Gaulle was president. He had the idea to meet the Germans and to make something like a special friendship and a special process of reconciliation with Germany. In 1958, he invited Adenauer, the German president, the German chancellor, into his house, in this private house, as the only statesman who ever was invited there. And they spent days together, and they found a connection because they both were very cultivated, very conservative men, very Catholic as well. And de Gaulle was also a reader who liked German literature and German culture. And this was also something which built a bridge and created respect from de Gaulle, who formerly was the general who fought against the Germans and the Nazis in the World War. So there were many innovations in this process. Then they concluded there were several important speeches and visits, but there was a very important moment as well, as there was the Élysée Treaty, which had many innovations. So next slide, please. And there were, first of all, this European Union dynamics was very helpful for overcoming competition and having benefits from cooperation, so economical, but also military, and also for science, a lot of benefits. Then respect was a main factor I already talked about. And then new things they invented were the youth encounters. This was very important to have youth encounters and to have a whole organization to organize many, many youth encounters. And then the bordering regions were transformed from regions of confrontation into connecting regions where people work together across border. So the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the German-French Youth Office was built after the Élysée Treaty, so in 1963, And until today, they have 9 million participants, 9 million young persons in 360,000 programs. They took part. And it also includes professional training. School boys and girls can live a certain time in the other country, have holidays together, and have political trainings together, and a lot of interesting things they do. They have this office has a 30 million euro budget per year, and there are many kinds of pro bono work as well in this. So it's very flourishing and very strong ways that the young people could connect and create another relationship, because before Germany and France fought a lot of wars against each other, and it was a bit sad that it was kind of a legacy of enmity, which changed completely. So next, please. City twinnings. I have here a link to the list of the city twinnings, German, French, and maybe you can estimate how much cities have this twinning contract with each other. For example, from Palestine, Palestinian cities and German cities, we have something like 5 contracts. But between Germany and France, there are 800 or more. So almost every city has their exchanges, their cooperations on the city level, which of course brings the population together. And this is a second important thing, that to connect the population is very important, and to create organizations who do it in a sustainable way. And besides the first thing, that respect is working, and that sometimes very conservative people can also create a reconciliation. Next, please. The German-Jewish reconciliation, it was of course difficult because of the Holocaust, but it was crucial for Germany for being accepted in the UN and internationally, because of the US, who was very much always in favor of Israel, and still is. And but the German society had also a benefit by remembering the Holocaust. It's changed the German society, but it's also a bad aspect in the German foreign policy is that there is a certain pro-Israel bias still always present. It's sometimes a bit changing, but it's still present. And there are also historians' work who showed it, that it already in the 50s was like this. And I'm sad about this and hope this will change. But it's also a reconciliation a bit against another group, against the Palestinians in this time. Next, please. So special topics with the German Jewish, because the victims were not Israelis. The victims of the Holocaust were no Israeli, because Israel was not found at this time. There were, but there were Jews who themselves did not want mainly to emigrate to Israel, and were not Zionists. But they have special topics to pay reparations, also individually, and not only to the state. So this was achieved, and then also that the Germans themselves started to prosecute the perpetrators of the Holocaust, and it was not anymore international. And the third main point, that in the very center of Berlin, the Holocaust Memorial was placed, which is also unique for a country that makes in the middle of its parliament and its capital such a memorial for saying sorry. There's also a memorial for Sinti and Roma, also directly besides parliament. It's smaller, but it's also shows that here really there is repentance and the willingness to do differently in the future. So next, please. Here you have the Holocaust Memorial, and I see the photo behind the building is the Parliament, and the other building on the right side is the American Embassy. So next, please. German-Polish reconciliation, special issues were the racist attitudes of Nazis against the Polish people between the 5.5 million deaths in Poland. So Poland was after Soviet Union and Germany, the third group, the third most people who died in the World War in the West. In the East, of course, Chinese were most. So many civilians were killed in Poland in the war. And this was an issue, and as well, German refugees came from territory which became Polish after 45, and there were about 7 million Germans who had to leave territories which became Polish after this. So next slide shows this a bit. Next slide, please. So here you see Germany. In blue, you see how Germany is today, the size of Germany today. The yellow are the territories Germany lost after First World War to France, Belgium, Denmark, and Poland, and Lithuania. And then you have the green territories which Germany lost to Poland after Second World War. And in the map on your right, you have Poland, which was much more in the east, and it was transported to the west. And the people who lived in the east of Poland, the Polish people, had to leave their country and to go into the houses of the Germans. And there were complete cities which were completely German, like Breslau, Wrocław today, and the Germans had to leave, and Polish people who also had to leave their homes in cities like Lemberg or Lwów, is a Polish name, had to go to Wrocław. Next slides, please. Next slides, please. Here you see the Germans leaving. The city is Breslau or Lwów at this time, and all the houses were reconstructed and by Polish people who lived then in them. Also the intact houses. So next, please. So in the German-Polish reconciliation, bishops and church leaders arrived very much to convince the population of both countries for this reconciliation process. So it was also an open letter by the bishops from Poland and also from Germany that we need to have a peace process, and this has a lot of effect on it. And then there were also important symbolic acts like Willy Brandt in Warsaw, and also when Helmut Kohl was in Kreisau. And next slide, please. So those are symbolic pictures. The left one you maybe know all, and the right one is also a hug which became historical. Next, please. So the German-Czech reconciliation had some specialities. For example, that the refugee from Czech Republic, there were also quite a lot of Germans who had to leave the country, were themselves active in some parts of them, not all, but some were active for reconciliation. And then there was a historians' commission to settle disputes on on the numbers of victims of this forced displacement. And then there was a German-Czech future fund to foster projects to do together with Germans and Czechs. Next slide, please. The German-Greek reconciliation is now much more recent. In the financial crisis in 2005, it was shown that there was reconciliation needed because there were strong animosities on both sides against each other. And there were new efforts now. The German politicians pronounced apologies in martyr villages from the Second World War. There was German-Greek Youth Office was opened, and the Future Fund, so combining the French and the Czech approach. But still there is a discussion about reparation and populism in Greece using this. Next, please. So here you see, for example, the Germans characterizing the Greek as betrayer in a journal, and the Greek press presenting Merkel as a Nazi in 2005. Next. So, and here we have now the president making an apology in a village which has been burned down with massacre by German soldiers in the Second World War. And on your right, you have the youth office organized meeting between Greek and German youth. Next, please. And here was a conference in a martyr village in the north of Greece, and on the bottom, on the right side, the person you may know, this is me when I was younger. So we took also part in this process, and it was very touching also to see how things start to move. Next slide, please. So, summary, are there inspiration? I think yes. Of course, there have been lacks of implementation and lacks of success, but what would have been the alternatives? Germany isolated, or ongoing disputes on many issues. So next slide, please. So working off history changed to society. I think this is important because the Germans had a benefit from this, except the actors of the perpetrators of atrocities. And we could really create a post-Nazi era. And this is not easy, and it took decades, and it's still some rest of this Nazi spirit and thinking in Germany. But we could also create a post-Nazistic identity. So I think a Nazist is somebody who thinks he is always the greatest and the best, and he did never anything wrong. This is fortunately not the case for the German identity. They accept and they know that they did a lot wrong. And then there were also empathy with refugees, I think, is a good example that this could grow in the situation. So next, please. Next slide, please. So here, in 95 was there was a, go please back to this last slide. So the last slide shows this one, that there was an exhibition about the crimes of the German soldiers in the Second World War, and there were manifestations against this exhibition, 5,000 in Munich, but there were 10,000 on the other side who said, no, we are against fascism, militarism, and war, both in Munich. And this showed how people are struggling on the past, but more or less the peaceful side is winning. So next, please. Here the refugees are welcome is written in German. Next one. Next slide. Here as well, many people in a football stadium, refugees welcome. Next slide, please. So inspirations to have a short list. So historians working off what happened, historians commission, youth exchanges, city twinnings, public apologies, the EU integration, and changing border regions to bridging regions. This would be a bit my list of possible inspirations from Germany, which could have some impact of in some context, also in your context, one or the other thing might play a role. And I would also try to say it that we are connected with all those works in Germany and also willing and able to get you contacts and also to provide you much more information about how those things worked and were constructed. Thank you very much. I think it's we are still go please back. No, back to the other. The strongest point is the continuity. This is also something to say. The other slide, please. Strongest point is continuity, and you can see if you do not give up with reconciliation, things change. And finally, this creates trust and political, economic, and human success and happiness. And the happiness you may see on the following pictures. Next, this is a German-Polish youth group. Next, this is German-French. And next, and this is German-Greek. And so I think this is beautiful to see, and I thank you very much for your attention. The floor is now open for questions, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Martin. I would like to ask a question. Since we're talking about Germany as the case study, in the past couple of years, there's the rise of nationalism, neo-Nazis, and the far-right movements were witnessed, where many cases of violence, for example, like the shooting on the synagogue in Halle, or the killing of the regional politicians on a politician in Kassel. There are the 9 migrants who were killed in Hanau, and then the Chemnitz cases, clashes, for example, against refugees. The AfD is now in the parliament. So to what extent can we say reconciliation could live? Like you ended your presentation saying that the strongest point is continuity. Do we see this against reconciliation? Like I'm not against reconciliation, but I would like to understand how far can we take reconciliation as granted for the future?
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent question. So the main thing is that reconciliation is a long way. It's 100 years or more. And now we are in the year something like 70 that we are doing reconciliation, and we need maybe more than 100 years to have really something more or less overcome. So it's still a struggle in the German society. And both parts are strong. Also the pro-reconciliation and pro-refugees part is strong and is very active. And on the other side, this AfD and this criminals who are making attacks against people who go into a synagogue or something like this, or just having a job because they're coming from another country or are Muslims or something like this, they are also active and going to extreme activities. So I think reconciliation is not granted, but we have to continue, and it will be a long way to overcome this. And on the other side, it's the the right-wing parties and their activities are not any more particularly different from some neighboring countries or countries where also such violences could be found, like in Norway, for example. And yeah, so we go on and we are happy on what is functioning, and it will take still some decades and generations.
Yes, Rola, I don't know if I can ask a question to Martin.
Yes, of course, Doctor, please.
I would like to thank you, Professor Martin, for your, very informative, very, smooth sailing. You are good smooth sailor, always in the issues of, reconciliation and peace studies. Martin, what I have noticed from your presentation as a new experience attached with reconciliation, and I felt the approach is state to state. It is more state to state. It is from leadership of Germany, to other leadership of other countries. Also, although we have seen, some public engagements, youth exchange, civil society meetings, apologies, but, I believe, the experience of Germany with reconciliation is more leadership oriented. It is more, elite oriented. So it is more or less similar, to conflict resolution, at early stages. My question is more or less theoretical, Martin. I don't know if you can, put some light, some enlightenment, on this question, because we always, benefit from your experience and from your intellectual approach. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words, Ayman. So in Germany, there was always both. There were the politicians who made this reconciliation a topic and the continuity of the politics, but there were always civil society organizations which were very much active. For example, in this village in Greece where I have been, there was a neighboring village where things were even much worse, where many people, all the men have been murdered by German soldiers. And there was a monument, and this monument was erected by some normal people who were school teachers in a North German small city, and they had heard about this and found it so disgusting and so heartbreaking what happens there, and they came there and they made a monument there and said, we are so sorry about what happened there. There were no organization behind, there were not even religious, only a human aspect. And this was quite often also the case. And then there were the organizations like Action Reconciliation, who made volunteerships for young people available to work without being paid to help the victims of the Germans in other countries, in Holland, in the US, in Poland, in many countries. You can go and do some work, for example, social work, with old people or people who are now handicapped, who were victims of the German occupation, and young people do it for free. 1 year they give of their life for this, and it's still very active thing. Or there are association like the association about the graves of the soldiers, and they have as a motto reconciliation on the graves since the 50s. So this is also civil society. So my answer would be it's always both, and this is also always the best for reconciliation process. If it's only civil society, then there are points where issues cannot be settled because the state is not acting and paying reparations or doing things. And if it's only the state, the population might change, vote for another government, and then the thing is over.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
ما بعرف إذا في أسئلة حابين تسألوها ولا خلص ننتقل لدكتور إياد. في حد؟
Please.
Dr.
Yes, I have one.
Dr. Walid.
Yes, I have one.
Dr. Walid, start. Yeah, Dr. Walid.
Hello, Mr. Martin. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, what convinced Germany to go to reconciliation? I need one reason, one main reason.
Depends on whom you ask what convinced himself, but
No, my
it was
question is,
clear for
have you got my
everybody
question?
said it.
Have you got my question?
One reason what brought the Germans for reconciliation.
Yeah.
So I think it was a clear view that that we need good relationships in the world, and we had come into a very bad situation and went a wrong way, very much down. And that we have to start completely new and start something new and something different. All this nationalism, all this worldview wars, this revenge for Versailles Treaty, and all this those approaches were leading to a catastrophe. And if we would continue, we would the whole country would be not existing anymore. There is a German poet, Bertolt Brecht, quite famous one. He said, Carthago, Carthago in Tunis, made 3 wars. After the first, it was still powerful. After the second, it was still existing, and after the fourth, it was not be found anymore. And this was Carthago was meant this could happen to Germany. So they were clear that they have to change. So realism, I think.
So is it the Germans' defeat in the Second World War who forced Germany to go to reconciliation?
Yeah, it was a defeat. It was a defeat, but it was also how the defeat was. It was a very shameful defeat because so many crimes had been committed by the German state, and so many evil things a bit everywhere in Europe where they were.
Okay, thank you.
بدي اسال انا سؤال ممكن دكتوره رولا.
اوكي تفضل دكتور سعيد تفضل.
عندي سؤالين، سؤال واحد
Professor Martin, could you please choose the English from the globe on your computer, on your mobile? On your mobile screen, there is a globe icon. Please choose English in order to hear the question in English language.
Another globe icon?
It's not globe, it's an interpretation.
Or interpretation, yeah.
I see it, I cannot find it here.
You can't find in the bottom of the screen.
Ah, okay, it's
click English button.
I think I did it.
Okay.
I think I did it.
Okay.
Yeah? Yeah.
اوكي
سعيد تفضل.
يعطيك العافيه دكتور. في البدايه في سؤالين. السؤال الاول المصالحة مع روسيا لم يتطرق إلى طرف مهم في الحرب مع ألمانيا وهي روسيا، وخسرت أكثر من 22 مليون إنسان في هاي الحرب، وكان في دمار كبير جدا لروسيا والاتحاد السوفيتي سابقا. لم يتطرق في حديثه إلى موضوع المصالحة مع روسيا. هذا سؤال. والسؤال الثاني، في الحالة الفلسطينية يعني الشعب الفلسطيني تحمل مسؤولية كبيرة جدا جراء الهولوكوست، ودفع ثمن باهظ واللي شفت انه الحديث كان بتمركز حول المصالحة مع إسرائيل، وفي ذات الوقت بيتم تناسي يعني الحقوق التاريخية للشعب الفلسطيني، واللي جزء منها بتتحمله ألمانيا وبريطانيا. وطبعا سؤالي في هاي الحالة إنه كيف ممكن ألمانيا تدفع باتجاه المصالحة اللي هو بتحدث عنها بحاجة إلى فترة طويلة من الزمن، في ذات الوقت إحنا صار لنا 70 عام أو أكثر في محاولة لإيجاد حلول للسلام، ونفشل بسبب إنه ضعف يعني الضغط الدولي على إسرائيل، وإنه الشعب الفلسطيني ذاته قدم الكثير مقابل إحلال السلام. فإنه مجرد بناء شراكة مع إسرائيل أو توأمة هذا غير كافي لإحلال السلام، لأنه الموضوع صراع حول الأرض وعلى الحقوق. يعني سؤالي هان إنه كيف ممكن تحقق سلام مع محتل أو تتصالح مع محتل مقابل إنه يحتلك؟ شكرا.
Yeah, shukran as well. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is it functioning?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, the first question with Russia. It is true that many things are still to be done with Russia, and also Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states, as they were communists. There was not so much done during the Cold War, and afterwards it did not happen enough, I think. So I think there must be made more efforts with reconciliation with the former Soviet Union. There is another aspect also important, that in those countries there were also the atrocities of the Stalinism, and there was official policy a bit to silence all the past. And if you hear, for example, Putin, when he talked about reconciliation with Germany, he said the Russians normally have not so much against the Germans. And why? Because they won the war. So it's a bit the feeling that they won the war, and that is the most important. But it's I think there's still much more to be done, and there are people in civil society as well making a lot of efforts to work for this, and there must be something changing. And with Israel and Palestine, so the situation is that that the Germans have, I think, a responsibility also for Palestinians, because the Palestinians are in a certain way also the victims of the Holocaust. And I think without the Holocaust, maybe not so many people would have immigrated to Israel. Israel would not have been able to defend so much their occupation politics, their wars, their annexations, and all these things. And therefore, I think that the Germans are much more responsible to do much more for Palestinians, and also, for example, to end occupation. But there is still a huge group which only wants to please a bit, so the Americans and the Jews around the world and the Israelis, and saying we are on your side, which are quite strong in German politics still. But I hope this will change, and there are also people who work on this and want to change it. And yeah, we will have a new government in this fall, and there will be no more Angela Merkel, and a new era will start. And I hope that this will be an era which will be more just with Palestinians and work more for peace also, and just solution and the end of the occupation. So this is what I can say. I hope that also on the international level, the discussions against occupation will be stronger, because occupation normally has a sense a bit to settle a situation after a war, but it should be ended after 4 or 5 years. You see, in 1945, the Second World War ended. In 1949, there were founded the 2 German states. So there was no occupation anymore. Well, the soldiers stayed a bit there in the country, but it was different. There were independent states. And this was after complete defeat and complete destruction. So why Israeli occupation now lasts so long? And all the other occupation situations around the world are also so problematic. And there should be a kind of expiration date, that the occupation becomes illegal after a certain time. After a certain time, they must leave the country. If not, it would not correspond to international law. This is my hope, that this will become an international standard. But yeah, we have to work for this, and it's not yet so far. But here I see a bit a kind of possibility to go on. I stop here. I will not talk for hours on this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Martin. I think we'll stop here. We don't have any other question. And then we will move to Dr. Iyad. Dr. Iyad, you will have 45 minutes for your representation, and then 15 to 20 minutes for a question.
Okay, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Martin.
Thank you very much, Shirul. I have actually 2 computers because my computer is burning and it turns off. So if it turns off, I will just switch to the other computer. And I'm sorry for this, just the computer is not working very well. So I will now move to the lecture that I have prepared. I need to just know what it is. Okay, here it is. Okay, let's continue. Can everyone, can you see this PowerPoint? Okay, so I will start here. I will start continuing from where we left last time, and where we talked about the Holland perspective and applied for NESIS or from ACES in Internet Research Methodology, and move more about what is applied from ACES and how it can be applied. So how to move from philosophy into from theory to practice. So here is in this slide, I'm going to talk about in this lecture, I hope so, if we have much time, to talk about applied phronesis, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, ethnography approach, mixed method research design, digital humanities, qualitative content analysis, and in vivo software for Windows for qualitative analysis. What I will do actually is just to give you a brief introduction of what we do and how we do it in Jena and what is our applied research. So we usually concentrate on developing theoretical framework into practice. And this is how we are working in Jena. So here, as I said before, applied phonetic approach is done by, it's taken from the Aristotelian Nocemian ethics book, actually. And this is where he developed what is applied, he developed what is the phonetic theory. I can actually read it for you if you want and maybe move on it little by little so to really just grasp, because this is very important. From this aspect came into applied phonetics approach, and then it came into interdisciplinary approach, and then it uploaded to transdisciplinary, and then it uploaded into digital humanities, and then now it uploads into data science and then AI. So I started like from this, the beginning of what the bases are from theory. The theory here and the philosophy that they do is called applied phonetic research. So here Aristotle writes, we may grasp the nature of prudence, and this prudence means to go to wisdom. Phronesis, if we consider what sort of people we call prudent. So can we understand how can we become a wise person or a wisdom? Well, it is thought to be a mark of prudent to the category of a guy who has wisdom. He needs to be able to deliberate rightly and in the right and advantageous. But nobody deliberates about things that are invariable. So how can you deliberate about something that you cannot touch? So prudence cannot be a science or art. So wisdom cannot be a science or art, not science. Science in this case calls episteme, which means knowledge. Because what can be done in variable, it may be done in diverse ways or not done at all. This is knowledge, where he say knowledge can be debated in different ways. And art, which is technique, which is a product, a process, or a practice. This is what the technique is. An action or production are generally different, and they are different than science. So how you can become wisdom or wise, or to come to a prudent state of mind or a prudent practice in the end. Or which means wisdom. For production aims to the end other than itself. So the product itself, it aims to a transformation of a different thing of what it started for him from. This is what he's saying. But this is impossible in the case of action because the end is merely doing well. So at the end, you want to have what they call best practice. So you will always look for best practice. So you keep fixing and transforming and working on what you started. And at the end, you don't have what you started. You have something new. Well, what remains then is that it is real statement, reasoned, and capable of action, but things that are good or bad for men. So the transformation that happens, it might be good or might be bad for men. We consider that this quality belongs to those who understand the management of household or state. So this is how it happens usually in the transformation. So this is what he speaks of Aristotle. So now the end process, he calls it phronesis, and it's a prudent to attain to the best judgment for an argument. So it is the best argument for best judgment for an argument that you can get. So it's always into transformation. So I actually might move to the other. Okay, now what I can see here is that this is the book for Bennett Flug-Biget, and his book said about making social science matter again. As I understood from working with Arab universities, social sciences, nobody registered to them anymore. So Bennett Flug-Biget, he's the head of chair at the University of Oxford for the mega projects. Mega project, when I say mega projects, like the projects between Britain and France, the train underwater, he was the guy who did this, and the speed bus railway and the train railway, these are considered mega project. Today they are doing a mega project, which is the Japan Olympics Games. So that's what it means, mega project. So making social science matter again, how can you make social science matter again is by, in this book, he calls for applied phronesis, that you must integrate the social sciences in different sciences. If you do not integrate them, they will die. So the reason nobody will work with them anymore. The good thing about social sciences is that it studies humanities, and with the humanities you can integrate different types of humanities with their knowledge. When you say when you have knowledge, which is science, which means you are integrating with different disciplines at the same time. And from that, it came to understand that applied phronesias can to develop what they call interdependencies, or interdependence, or integration of disciplines, or now what we call interdisciplinary research approach. So what they did, and they have created a different book, another book, he did it, it's called Real Social Science. And this Real Social Science, he takes different aspects of developing applied phronesias in different places, in different projects. Political science, economy, in every kind of social science, in different aspects, in philosophy as well, in religion. So here and in research projects. He concentrated more on research projects and how you can develop the mega projects, the big mega projects. So here, as I told you, this is another book about Routledge Handbook for Interdisciplinary Research. So this is also a book, contemporary research in characterizing by growing interdisciplinary. So you can understand how interdisciplinary are being approached and researched. So now I'm moving more for now. It became today that there is no only one discipline. You cannot say I want to study engineering, but I don't want to study humanities. And what we do actually in Vienna, even if you are an engineer, and in Germany, let's say, they integrate disciplines. You cannot be like in humanities and know nothing about IT, and that you just know how to do surveys, how to develop, and without integrating them with the digitization world. So this is one of the aspects that we are working on. The second one, this book, handbook, which I'm really working with, is Handbook for Transdisciplinary Research. This is where it starts with a chapter about applied phronesias. They also study what really happens with the Aristotelian way of thinking and how it can be developed. Now here I can go more further into my research and talk about a transdisciplinary. This was taken from the book Transdisciplinary on page 42. So transdisciplinary means about three topics, three items that you need to understand. So the first one called problem identification and structuring. Here is the way what we called before episteme, knowledge of the problem that you want to research. Then you have to do a problem analysis. Problem analysis is the technique, the practice itself. And then bringing result to fruition. Fruition is the phronesis, developing prudent. And as you say, this will develop what we call a drill of knowledge, and a drill that goes around in different aspects. And this drill develops power relations, develop change for the discipline itself. So in the humanities, if we call for social change, we are calling for how social change happens. A lot of people want to understand how it happens, how they do it and apply it. They start with this kind of theory of transdisciplinary. So this is a transdisciplinary theory, and this is how it works. And here, as you see in the second slide, the emergence of transdisciplinary as a form. So the first up on the right, you can see you can see the basic research. You have problem fields and how it tackles each field by itself. This is how research was done and how it does in discipline. And you have applied research. As you see, applied research can happen with private sector, tackling different categories to be applied in human life. Transdisciplinary, it's applying the action plus, this is the action, as we said before, and this is the episteme, and this is in the middle is the applied phronesis. Yeah, so this is how they are doing it. So here I made it like the milestone in transdisciplinary research, so you will understand really what's really happening here. So you have knowledge concerning the current situation. It's all a big system. This was introduced in 1997 to understand how transdisciplinary works. So you have knowledge concerning the current situation, system knowledge. And then you have knowledge concerning the target situation, targeting knowledge. And then you have the action knowledge. So you have on the left, you have episteme. Down, you have practice, which is technique. And then they decided phronesias is the target. Why? Because the phonetic approach means you want to understand the best practice of how to do stuff. An action, not an action but an integration of knowledge and action together. So this is what exactly they meant about it. So here we are in this figure 2.1, interdependencies between systems. So now they start calling it a system, target and transformation knowledge and their particular challenges. This is in 2007. So you have here transformation of knowledge, target knowledge, and system knowledge. And this is how it happens. And now like what we are really doing now. We are developing a system knowledge, people from Germany, and you have the target knowledge is the transformation that happens between the system knowledge, Germans, Palestinians together. They are gathering information that to develop transformation knowledge to get to the best practice. So this is what they call transdisciplinary approach. So here I introduce also, this is my book that was published last year, Internet Communication Technology, ICT for Reconciliation. I did applied from NICIAS in ethnography and internet research methodology. So what I have added into the applied for NICIAS transdisciplinary approach, I thought that internet communication technology can become what Beneflou-Bouget calls the ultra-dynamic power. Because usually what happens, if you want to go back to this one, in the middle of this, there's an ultra-dynamic powers that happens. And you need to understand what is the ultra-dynamic powers that can shift between the knowledge and between the action and can make it happen forever. So according to Beneflou-Bouget, that he actually takes from Nietzsche, power is knowledge and knowledge is power. So now, but what is interacts between them? You have to switch between them. It is the ultra-dynamic power. So powers has to be shifting. And if we have reconciliation, what reconciliation does, a lot of people talk about reconciliation, that it cannot happen when you have a struggle power between two entities. One is more than the other. But in reconciliation, what really happens in the middle of conflict, Hölderlin perspective, it becomes the ultra-dynamic powers of change. Because it switches when the guy who has weapons, but he doesn't have power. Meaning having a weapon and a nuclear power does not mean that you have power. Even now as well, this is what happens with reconciliation as well. It shifts the power relations between the two entities that are in conflict. That's where I understood that reconciliation can be the ultra-dynamic power of relations between two struggle entities that are in conflict. So here as well, the book, and this is the theory that I was talking about. So how the Hölderlin perspective happens, this is for Professor Leiner in 2016. So if we do the mechanism and strategies, the methods, the know-how on epistemology, on the reconciliation process, plus if we add a technological implementation for the practices of reconciliation, then what the practice of reconciliation can happen is can switch powers between the technology or the technique. The technique is not technology, the technique is the how-to, and the epistemology is the know-how, and then they can shift between each other. So for example, in my example that I can say, would you have two powers that are in conflict? Reconciliation can be the one that can switch between the powers in all the time. And this is how reconciliation can develop more knowledge-based society. And that's what we want to do at the end. There's someone who actually in the last session that you said that you cannot bring yourself into discussions usually in research. Well, when you are doing transdisciplinary, according to Beneflou-Bouget and the Aristotelian approach, you bring yourself in, but you should not be biased. So this is the difference. You have to bring your knowledge. And at this stage, he calls it the pheronymus. The pheronymus is the person or the society that are in transition, and you have to bring them to the point. I cannot bring someone from Korea to understand the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I can bring an Israeli who can say the Israeli perspective, and then I can give a Palestinian who can speak about the Palestinian perspective. But then if you want to become the pheronymus, can be one of both, or both of them, or one who are from both parties that cannot be biased. If he wants to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but if someone who wants to talk about the Korean South and North problem, he cannot be a Palestinian. He has to be a Korean who knows, can experience the change that can happen. He can develop the start, which we call the ultra-dynamic powers between the two conflict area. So here, this is in my book. A lot of people understand methodology. Methodology is not just a practice. But I understood from a lot of students that they say that, oh, we are doing now the methodology, and then you read what they did the practice. The practice is not the it's a methodological practice. You have to understand the theoretical framework of the practice and then apply the practice to it. So what happens into a lot of what we see in research, that they do the practice without the theoretical framework. So what happens to them is like they don't understand why they're doing what they are doing. And this is a big problem, that they don't know what they are doing. So what we are now here, what I explain, that before I do the methodology and the practice, I need to develop the theoretical framework that the practice can be built on. And this is what I call here applied forensic social science. I start with phase 1, understanding the philosophy, and then I develop the complex mixed method social justice research design, how to apply the practice to it, and then the tools. And now I move from that, the tools, which is ethnography approach for reconciliation. This is done by Robert Koznets. And then I go into the method of researching reconciliation process, the method strategies of reconciliation to see how it can be applied. And then I do, to understand the data that really happened, is qualitative internet research. And then we can understand whether there was social change toward the reconciliation process or not. This is part of the research that I was doing, actually. So here I would like to show you how applied Fornicius as a theoretical framework in ICT and intercommunication technology really works. As you see here, you have ICT for the knowledge on the left side, and then the techni on the second phase, and then third phase is Fornicius, where you apply everything together. But you see they are at the end connected with the Pheronymus, the agent who brings the practice, the reality, the values, the power, the dialogue. So this guy has to be part of where you are in the research area, because you cannot research people that you are not part of them. It's going to be like it's not, you can take other information or what they are really doing. So now we're talking about applied forensic social science. So this is what I did exactly to show you how I did it in intercommunication technology. So in my case now, it became that ICT is the element of power, because when you go online and speak, whether you have a forum, for example, that have Israelis and Palestinians together, and they start developing bridge of communication and dialogue. One of the most bridges of communication and dialogue is reconciliation, and understanding the narrative of the other is also reconciliation. So ICT became the power of change that changed ideas, and not to change or transform ideas, but more to transform the way people are thinking by the narrative of the other. As I know that someone asked, how do you change, social change people of what their beliefs in? So once you find the ultra dynamic powers, as you understand, you don't transform your knowledge and narrative to believe your enemy's narrative. No, you understand his narrative and where he comes from, and that develops the change. But it does not change you, it changes the perspective of what you are talking about, what you are, his narrative, your perspective to his narrative. So the idea is not to transform people to love reconciliation and to hug each other. That's not reconciliation. Reconciliation is to understand your narrative of your enemy, to understand his perspective and where he comes from. And from understanding where he comes from, you can understand, well, you can tell him, okay, you can do what you want, can have security if you give me my own security as well. So this is also part of the reconciliation process. So here, this is like the theory of communication for Pierre Bourdieu. He is very known for the communication process. And now I'll move more into it. And for Habermas, he calls it the action communication theory. So you have more than one practice I, and then practice I plus one. So if everyone is talking about Fornicius, for example, and everyone is talking about there's developing of knowledge, there's developing of transfer, and there's a practice. The practice is you are speaking, dialogue, and the practice is knowledge, and there's being transformation of knowledge and practice. The idea of behind the applied Fornicius is transdisciplinary, as it transforms into transformation of knowledge. And this is why a lot of now it's transforming also in political science, in social science, in computer science, in engineering. If you want to do an engineer today, you have to understand why you are doing the engineering, how you can help humanity to develop best practice in engineering. So here, I took from the Center for Reconciliation, the Mary Hoch Institute. It was 2-3 days ago, where they were talking about, it was for the George Mason, where Professor Leiner actually spoke there as well, and we participated with them. This was introduced to them, how do you develop practice, from theory to practice in reconciliation. So here, as you see, he has two people who are in, first he said, first step, there's trauma awareness can create curiosity into renewal relationships, society and towards personal healing. So he said trauma awareness. In my point of view, it understood as recognition of the suffering of the other. This is how we see it. Parties of conflict enter into incremental process to define what is the inclusion. This is what happens when you develop dialogue and you develop reconciliation methods between the two conflicted people. So there it happens inclusion. Where can we be in together with the same ideas? Third step in the process, parties define what is fairness and what is justice to each one of them. So you have two entities that are in conflict. Their justice is different than your justice. Their fairness is different than my fairness, but where they can come together. So this where it becomes best practice. That's where applied phronesis comes, and that's where transformation of knowledge comes. When we say transformation, so it's not you transform yourself. No, transformation of knowledge means that you gain more knowledge to develop more analysis to the situation that you come into it. So path towards reconciliation continues to keep justice inclusive. Justice keeps reconciliation honest. So this is how he says that justice, two elements, justice and reconciliation are two different things and two different topics. They were integrated for transformation of knowledge. So while they were transforming the knowledge, what really happened is justice became inclusive to everyone, and justice can keep reconciliation honest. So here I go into more deeper into now, after I have understood what the theoretical framework, what I go into what I do is internet research methodology. So I use this is a very nice book actually for anyone who wants to study and research or do a PhD. It's for John Striswell, and it's a very simple book. And it tells you how to write your research and how research can be conducted. I went more into mixed method research design, how mixed method research design can be guidance to develop the transformation knowledge. And then I went more into now there, I have understood by John Striswell, there is 4 qualitative traditions: narrative research, phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, and case study. This is what is known about methodology. And I added, the thing that I added here is the theoretical framework. So the methodology, without the theoretical framework, you're just doing a practice. So you become the machine. But when you have a theory behind it, let's say, for example, Facebook. Facebook is a practice for what we call deliberative democracy. The whole world is using it. Nobody knows. It is democracy. It has the principle of democracy, but what it is exactly, what type of democracy that it works. There is aggregative democracy and there's deliberative democracy. Where it goes more into deliberative democracy than aggregative democracy, its tools is more deliberative democracy. This is where you talk about social media. This is actually what the Russians said about the Americans when they started those social media. They are tools of war for democracy, and that they want to implement the democratic tools on them. And Russia, until today, do not accept to have WhatsApp. They do not accept to have a Facebook page, and not even YouTube. They have their own Facebook page, social media. It's called NK, and they have a different social approaches. Now, also with Trump, as you know, Trump has stopped the Huawei and Samsung and a lot of products that are coming from China. And the reason for this is because now we are in the age of data science, and the data science, when you're using Apple phone and American products, all your information, you're using Gmail, all the information is stored where? It's stored in the American servers of Google. But if you start using Huawei and Android, all your information is stored in China. Why do you need your information? Because it's data science. They take your data, whether it's good or bad or whatever it is, and they can develop their own analysis of what really is happening. So for example, they understand that I study phonetic social science, they just write applied phronesis, it takes them every people who are studying for social sciences. If they want your picture, for example, and they can get your picture, they can get, so this is where Trump was against it, and he went into war with the data science war with China, and then he until today they have problems with China. So here I introduced something new. I called it the qualitative tradition, ethnography. So this tradition, ethnographic qualitative tradition, this is what I went up with in applied content analysis. So the study of an online community by using applied qualitative content analysis method to interpret and explore the culture of community or society. I will give you something that I did a study for 10,000 people with living on Facebook pages, for 2 different Facebook pages. And one was with for the Gazan people, and one was for the West Bankers. Actually, it was there was 10,000 people practicing. Then I could understand the data. One of the data was, who do you want to rule? More it was in Hamas, between Hamas and Fatah, but then I integrated the Jordanian government and who wants the king to rule. So it was interesting. I don't use names. So the more in Gaza, they appreciate more the kingdom rule of the Hashmi people. In the West Bank, it was 50%, 50-50, that people vote for each 10,000 groups. So even 50-50, not between Hamas and Fatah, by the way, between Fatah and Hamas and the government in Jordan, it was more the government of Jordan, not the government of Jordan itself, by the king of Jordan, to rule the West Bank and Gaza. This is what the people, this is what the data really said. And we cannot just say, no, the data is wrong. You cannot just say the data is wrong. But this is like, you can say that the voices are in West Bank, for example, more for Fatah movement. The voices are more for Hamas movement in Gaza. But then when you do, and you apply the big data science, which I called it the ethnography qualitative tradition, what I understood, no, if you bring the Jordanian king in, I think nor Fatah or Hamas, the people want more the Jordanian rule. And this was astonishing for me, but this is what the data said. This is one of the aspects why data science is very important, and it cannot be biased at the end. And this is very difficult, that to say that data is so biased, because you can have duplication. If you don't want to have duplication, you can do not permit to have duplication. And today there's a lot of ways that you cannot have duplication. Like, for example, your network card can be registered. And once your network card is registered, for example, and you vote, then what happens when you vote, you cannot vote again. So this is one of the easy steps that I can tell you that duplication cannot happen. So after this, I can move on. Just a moment. Okay. So now we go, there is some of what is, I want to introduce what is qualitative ethnographic tradition principles. So it's about what you do is you focus, that would be interpret and study the culture of an online community and interpret their engagement in real life. So what happens, why do people do ethnography today? It's not ethnography, it was called before ethnography, studying online ethnographic people, humanities. Now by Robert Koznetz in 2015, he called it ethnography, and he registered the term in his name. So it focuses to understand the culture and how the culture engages into real life. So this is why it becomes very important. And then you do data collection, data analysis, narrative form you can happen, and you have data collection procedures, you have data analysis procedures. It works on data collection, data analysis, representation using computer-assisted qualitative content analysis software, like NVivo for Windows. It's work data, and then you can interpret the data and help, and the software can help you understand the culture very well, what's really happening. So here I introduce for you the book of ethnography, 2015 and 2016, for Robert Koznetz. This book is a methodological book. Now we started with the theoretical framework. What is the methodology, research design? And now we went more into ethnography, studying people online. So key media, natural language, guiding metaphors, express motivation and needs, respond to feedback, hot topics. This was given to me by Robert Koznetz himself, by the way. Here, this was from a guy in Sri Lanka who understood why ICT is a very important topic to understand social change, tension, problem, and reason for change. So this is the cycle, what really happens when you start using ICT for reconciliation, where I told you there was a drill. What happens really is the drill of mind between people that are in conflict. So you have social change. Before coming to social change, there's tension between the two communities that are in conflict. Then they understand that there's the problems. And now they understand, after that, they reach for what a reason for change. And then you have social change. So these are what really happens. But to these to happen, you have to implement the reconciliation methods, strategies, and practices between two communities that are in conflict. So here, as you see, it goes more, I explain it more, with what happens, conflict transformation, strategies for reconciliation, mechanism for reconciliation, then you have digital transformation for reconciliation process, and then when I say conflict transformation. So it goes around and around, and it takes a long time. But why do people really do it? Why people have this problem and they want to do it? Because they want phronesis, the best practice, best life, best common future. I want my children to live the best knowledge, best teaching, best life, best. This is what was prudent. And then you go back to Aristotelian way of thinking. So here I introduce the steps for internet communication research discourse. So as you see here, the study, the epistemic theory, the mixed method, and then you have the knowledge where I study about what is moderation, reconciliation, and deliberative democracy. And then I go into the phase of analysis, coding, and then I do the interpretation and the evaluation. So this is just to introduce you what ethnography is. In the left, you see ethnography method, and in the right, you see ethnography methods. Here he does what he does here. This is for Robert Koznetz. He identifies ethnography. Online ethnography conducted in a specific manner, an interpretive research methodology that adopts the traditional in-person ethnographic research techniques. It's an anthropological study for the interaction and experience manifested through I call it digital communication. So the participant observational ethnographic procedure used online and can also expand to range other methods adapted in digital context. So he called it now big data and big data analytics. Today, that was in 2016. Today, we call it data science. And data science does not mean only computer people can study it. Data science means it's digital humanities, and you bring digitization and transformation age. So here is the steps that Koznetz, the process of ethnography, as he says. He redefined media mapping, he does, digital participation, observation, hermeneutics, and representations. And here also we know that he also speaks about the ethical considerations. What makes a particular piece of research and ethnography? I think now you understand what's next. Focus on deep cultural, informed understanding of focal phenomenon, side topic, or like, for example, you want to understand if the Palestinian would do reconciliation between Palestinians, or with the and if they are willing to understand if reconciliation is a process that can help end the occupation, for example. So this, you can use the digitization world to transform and understand the culture and where the culture in Palestine really understands. And here, primarily on data collected through internet apps and a mobile communication. And then as you see, it involves some form of personal participation. And this is the phenomenon that we talked about in the beginning. So, and first, it utilizes some recognizable mix of recommended ethnography research practices. So this is like what is ethnography and how he talks about ethnography and what distinguishes an ethnography. I like this one because it tells you where you start studying ethnography. So if you deep study interviews, you're doing humanities, social sciences. And if you go into data mining, so also data science alone, you are only doing data mining. But if you integrate both the interviews, the focus groups, the online service, and the data mining all together to understand what really this is ethnography. And all what you have done is transdisciplinary research at the end. So here is some of what is social media. You have here, softwares that are being used to study ethnography. Here is ethnography is highly, and also it is used for business. Actually, I can tell you an example, a real example. The good thing about ethnography, it's transdisciplinary approach. For example, the Apple iPhone, they wanted to study what is the most that Apple iPhone can, problems that it has. So according to an ethnography study, it was the screen of the iPhone breaks a lot and the battery. So they changed the screen to cost you only $75 and the battery to lower to $25. So this is like, I go more into what is the mixed method research design. I use the John Streetswell for it. And this is what I also use after that, developing the mixed method. I use the qualitative content analysis for Krippendorf for analysis. And there's like the different, for literature review, if anyone is interested in this. Now, I also use something called the explanatory mixed method research design. So how does it work? Just to introduce how it works, your communication research, you have qualitative data collection, and then you have data analysis. First quantitative in this part, and then qualitative data, and then data analysis, and then interpretation. He called this explanatory. This is Criswell 2014. And if you go here, this is a multi-phase, you call it multi-phase mixed method, where you have qualitative and quantitative, and you do interpretation for the data science, numbering, and you understand the number, what the numbers mean, and then you speak and you do another qualitative analysis, so interpretation. This is called also mixed method research design. So here, as you see, the approaches to coding can be influenced by methodology. Coding is analysis, amount of data type, why to code, to make sense of the analyzed data. Qualitative study, it can help generate general theories as well. Coding facilitates the organization, retrieval, and interpretation of data and leads to conclusion of the basis for interpretations. Okay, here I would like to say about the deductive mode of coding, how you analyze. So there's like 3 steps. You have the open questions, break down and compare categories data. And then they say the second step is exile, where you make connections between categories. So first you cancel into categories, and then you make connection between those categories, and then you select according to the theme you want to study. So this is also, now the computer assisted software for qualitative analysis, what I'm going to introduce for you is NVivo. NVivo is a software that is very famous in Australia, US, and UK. In Germany, MXQDA is famous. In the Arab world is more NVivo. People are using NVivo and MXQDA as well. So, and Atlas. Atlas is for quantitative, but NVivo is for qualitative. So here's what is coding procedure, how you do it. According to Criswell 2004, his book, Exploring Data, you take the images, categorize them, as we said, you label them, reducing to codes according to the themes, and then you understand the hypothesis of your problem. So this is also the analysis. So how do I do the analysis? So I did for Facebook pages, and then coding procedure, developing findings, presenting a description of the data and the themes, interpreting, finding, and relating to themes. Here is like a validation. So like the 3 process you have. You have the analysis, and interpretation, and then validation. You have to validate your data. What does validation mean? It means like if someone else comes and looks at his data, he can get to the same interpretation that you came to. So this is the whole full analysis procedure that I did while I was doing my studies. I will not go through it. This I am very interested for. This how it's the mixed method research design. So before you start to research, you have to understand where you're going to the research. So here I had episteme and techne at the same time, and then I had integration of data, as you see, because there I have integration of what? Numbers, when you comments and likes, and then I have integration of episteme articles that has been read, and what the articles were talking about. And then I have the research questions, and then I have a quantitative data collections, and then qualitative data analysis. I use NVivo to interpret the data, and then I go back to qualitative research questions, and then quantitative analysis, and then I go back to interpretation again. This is the process that John Criswell that I did for the interpretation of big data science. The data that I took about 2 Facebook pages, and the website had over 2.5 million visitors, and it had over about 250 articles, and about the data sets of the Facebook page was enormous, huge data sets. Yeah, and you're talking about 50,000 data sets, rows and everything. So this is what NVivo was doing. So here is the real, all the mixed method for digital reconciliation research. So this is how I did it, the whole mapping for it. Actually, here I use something called CMAP. CMAP is used for developing the mixed method research design. Before you do your whole work, you have to do this. If you do this, then you understand it. So now I have the first parts, and what I'm doing here were qualitative analysis. As you see, I have map trees, I have analysis techniques, clustering procedures, I have word trees, word charts, word cloud, cross-tabulation, visual analysis. So this is where the data came into it. So the process was discourse analysis, emerging themes, aggregation analysis, new themes, closure analysis, and then you have interpretation, and then you test your hypothesis. So that's where I was going. And here's some softwares that you can use. And now, as I say, here is the doctoral program roadmap as I was studying NVivo, how it goes, as you know, beginning, middle, completion, and beyond. And then you publish it. Here, this is NVivo. I don't know if we have still a little bit of time. If we have time, I can, I think we have still time. maybe 1 minute, so we can also see this, and then we are done. Let's see if it works.
More than 2.5 billion gigabytes of data are created every day, and 90% of this data is unstructured. We're faced with more data sources coming faster than ever in overwhelming volumes. Harness this data and use it to your advantage. Maximize your knowledge, gain an edge, and make better decisions. Whether completing a PhD, a competitor analysis, or a stakeholder consultation, gain an advantage with NVivo, powerful software that helps you make intelligent decisions. NVivo 11 Starter for Windows offers powerful yet easy-to-use tools for organizing and discovering insight in text-based data. If you need to analyze information like transcripts or articles, bring everything into NVivo to quickly and easily discover trends, themes, and patterns. Support your findings and tell your research story with beautiful visualizations. With NVivo Starter, you spend your time finding insights, not learning software. It's the perfect option to start your research journey. Building on NVivo 11 Starter for Windows, NVivo 11 Pro for Windows allows you to take advantage of more powerful data management, query, analysis, and visualization tools. Organize and analyze data, brainstorm ideas, map connections, visualize concepts, and share findings. Whether you're working on your own.
دكتور إياد بس ده لفت انتباهك إنه خلصنا ال 45 دقيقة، فإذا بتقدر تنهي.
ما بعرف أنا خلصت، بس هذا هو آخر شيء. إذا بتحبوا تكملوه مش مشكلة، إذا بدكم تكملوه ما عندي مشكلة.
يعني حاول شوي إنه تختصر، بلاش إنه عشان
أنا خلصت. هلا هذول بس سلايدز اللي فرجوهم كيف. هون في برو ستارتر اند بلس. هون عن الانفيفو اكثر، باور نودز، انفيفو لايسنس، تريننج ريسورسز. هون انا بفرجيكم ايش بعمل الانفيفو بالضبط. يعني زي هون الكونسبت نوتس، كونسبت مابس. هون ايش بحلل افلام وفويسز كمان. هذه الماب كثير مهمه للانفيفو. اذا بتدرسها بتطلع عليها شوي يو كان اندرستاند ان عندك هون كل انواع الاناليسيس كيف بتصير وكيف كونكتد اول توجذر. وهون تقريبا الماستر بروجرام عملناه مع الجامعه الاردنيه اللي هو ابلايد كومبيوتنج ساينس اند ديجيتال هيومانيتيز. هذا انتروديوسينج هون ديجيتال هيومانيتيز فور ريكونسيليشن بيس بيلدينج اللي انا قلت لكم عنها قبل شوي، انه كيف الاي سي تي بتقدر تطبق الريكونسيليشن. وتقريبا هيك بظن انا خلصت. هي هون الاي سي تي كيف تقدر تدخل بكل انواع شتى الترانسديسبلينري ريسيرش ابروتش. وهنا النهايه. شكرا كثير لكم. وتقريبا انا هيك خلصت الليكتشر.
يعطيك العافيه
دكتور إياد. وبعرفش هلا إذا في حدا بيحب يسأل سؤال يتفضل.
انا بدي اسال ممكن؟
اتفضل دكتور سعيد. طبعا.
لا يعطيك العافيه دكتور اياد. يا للاسف انه ما كانش الترجمه من البدايه، يعني ما بعرف شو كان السبب، في خلل تقني اكيد. بس انا سمعت شوي من في الاخر، بس حاولت افهم سياق المحاضره ككل. اكيد انها كانت ممتعه ومهمه جدا. سؤالي هو هل كل ما تفضلت به يمكن يعني ان يندرج ضمن توظيف الذكاء الاصطناعي اللي هو بين هلالين او بين قوسين قواعد البيانات الكبرى البيج داتا في الدراسات الاجتماعيه، من اجل يعني فهم عميق اكثر للحالات الدراسيه ضمن يعني منهجيه محدده علميه؟ يعني هل هذا ينصب ضمن الذكاء الاصطناعي؟
شكرا كثير لك على انتم سامعين. انا هلا نقلت على كمبيوتر ثاني عشان الكمبيوتر هذاك يوقف. كلام صحيح جدا اللي انت تحكيه صح. هذا احنا بلشنا هذه الدراسه بلشت بال 2014 13 ما كانتش موجوده، انا فرجيتكم اياه. هلا احنا عم نطورها اكثر للاي اي، الذكاء الاصطناعي صار داخل فيها، وانا عم بشتغل مع جامعه اوكسفورد فيها. فكلامك صحيح. هاي الداتا سامعيني؟
هلا
سامعيني؟
سامعينك دكتور.
سامعين.
اوكي، انا اليوم لك صراحه انه هذا مزبوط كلامك، انه هي الداتا ساينس. هلا الذكاء الاصطناعي بطل يدرس داتا بيسز، الداتا بيس عم تنتهي، صار هلا يكبوا كل الداتا بمكان واحد، والذكاء الاصطناعي هو يتعلم كيف ينقي الداتا. وهذا هو هلا كيف الذكاء الاصطناعي عم بياخذ الداتا ساينس والبيج داتا، صارت هلا عشان تقدر تدرسها بطريقه اسهل. الان عملت لك اياها عملي، اللي انت شفته هذا عملي، بس هلا طب في حدا بيقدر يسويها مش عملي اللي هو الاي اي. وهلا الاي اي هذا صار يتطور لدرجه انه صار تو ريكوجنايز الناس بلندن مثلا اللي كان يشتغل عليها صديق لإلي، انه عندهم ريكوجنيشن للناس بالشارع اذا هم مبسوطين ولا مش مبسوطين. وبعدين اعطوها للشرطه، والشرطه صارت تدرس اذا مبسوطين ومش مبسوطين، تعطيها للراديو، الراديو تقول لهم اذا مبسوطين ولا مش مبسوطين الناس اليوم كل يوم صبح. بس مزبوط كلامك، هذا بنعطى للاي اي. هلا صار الاي اي اللي هو تطور اكثر.
يعني هو كثير من القرارات السياسية في دول متقدمة جدا توظف البيج داتا في اتخاذ قرارات وسياسات اتجاه، يعني في السياسة الخارجية لهذه الدول اتجاه شعوب أخرى، مبنية بعتقد على البيج داتا، يعني توظيفها ومن خلال آليات جمع محددة زي ما تفضلت في محاضرتك. فيعني يا حبذا لو في إمكانية إنه تعطينا كمان في هذا الجانب. يعني إحنا بحاجة له أكثر لفهم توظيف قواعد البيانات أو البيج داتا، أفضل هيك نسميها، والذكاء الاصطناعي في الأبحاث تحديدا.
اقول لك احنا كان عندنا مشروع للذكاء الاصطناعي مع 7 جامعات عربيه، تم رفضه من قبل الايو نفسه. والسبب، وعملوا تحقيق معي انا وبروفيسور لاينر على الموضوع، عشان هم خايفين من هاي الناحيه انه الوطن العربي يصير يشتغل على هذا الموضوع. ولليوم حتى ما اجلناش ولا قلنا المشروع كله. يعني هاي المشكله كمان. يعني انا ما بقدر اقول لك مزبوط كلامك، انا عم بدرس، اقول لك عم بدرسوه بجامعه اوكسفورد اللي انت بتحكي فيه، وعندنا عم نعمله. هلا بلش الاي اي هو اللي يعمل اللي انا فرجيتكم اياه، الاي اي هو بيعمله. وانا بقدر اقول لك انه الاستخبارات العسكريه بتشتغل على هذا الاساس. داعش كانوا يلقطوها لما يحكوا انه اغتصبوا منطقه تم اغتصابها، ويحكوا وين هي موجوده، كانوا يعرفوا انه كلمه اغتصاب معناتها تفجير. اذا كان اختطاف معناته انكسر ايش اسمه، اختطاف معناته هم خسروا المعركه. هذه الداتا كلها قاعده اليوم تتراقب من كل محل بالعالم، عشان هيك بطل في برايفسي مزبوط كلامك. يعني هذا صحيح، البيج داتا هي اللي اليوم صارت دارجه.
علشان هيك عندهم الدراسات في الولايات المتحدة، في زيارة إلي كمان كثير كانت بتعتمد على هذه الآلية، وهي بتسهل عليهم الحصول على معلومات كبيرة في الحالات الدراسية بسهولة، يعني بسهولة فائقة ودقيقة كمان.
طبعا هذه بسهوله جدا انه تحصل على الداتا. وبعدين اذا كان عندك الاي اي شغال ومتعلم كيف يقدر يدرس الداتا، يعني انا اذا بدي اقدر ادرس كيف الناس يمكن تتقبل المصالحه مثلا، تقدر انت تخلي الاي اي يدرس كل البيج داتا ويقول لك المصالحه مستحيله، لانه هدول الناس الكالتشر تبعهم ما بتعلموا مصالحه قاعدين، الكالتشر تبعهم متعلم اكثر انه يكره العنصر الثاني، سواء هو اسرائيلي، فلسطيني، كوري، شمالي، جنوب افريقيا. ما بحكي على حدا معين انا، بس بقول لك الداتا ساينس صارت كثير اقوى. زي ما انا قلت لك، انا لما عملت الدراسه على انه حكومه لازم تحكم بين، عندي كان 100,000 داتا سيت. الداتا سيت 60% حكم الأردن، 40% حكم حماس، و40 يعني بين لما كانت الأردن بين الأردن وحماس بغزة 60 الأردن و40 حماس، بين الأردن والضفة كان 40 الضفة و60 الأردن. فهذه كانت يعني لحالها لإلي كانت شيء، يعني فهمت إيش الداتا كيف لما تيجي أنت توظف الاي اي لإلها كمثل الكالتشر، بصير واحد يعرف كيف ياخذ قرارات. زي ما انت، ما هو اسمه بريدكشن. اليوم بالجامعه الاردنيه عملنا بروجرام اسمه بريدكشن للاي اي للطرق بالاردن. الطرق بالاردن طبعا يكون بيستخدم ويز، بس الويز مشكلتك انه او بيستخدموا الجي بي اس تبع ايفون او هذا، بس مشكلته بيقدرش، بقول لك في بس بروح الزلمه. بس لما نصير نستخدم السوشيال ميديا
وعملت البنت الاب، الطلاب عملوا اب بياخذ السوشيال ميديا اللي على تويتر وبياخذ السوشيال ميديا اللي على الفيسبوك وبدرس الكلمات اللي بيحكوها الناس على السوشيال ميديا عن الموقع الموجود فيه الدراسه. بيعطي لك الاي اي تنبؤ الصبح من الناس وين المناطق اللي بدهم يمشوا فيها. انت لحالك تحكي انه مناطق مش رح تكون، انت لحالك تصير عارف المزدحمه. هذه اللي يسموها الترانسديسيبلينري ان ذا لايف وورلد، انه في علم الانسان لايف وورلد اللي هو ليش بعمل واحد ترانسديسيبلينري؟ لازم الريسيرش تبعك يكون لفائده الانسانيه، عشان هيك بصير عندك ترانسفورميشن. اذا الريسيرش تبعك ما بفيد الانسانيه، بفيدك انت لحالك، او انت عم تعمل ريسيرش لحالك، ببطل في عندك ترانسفورميشن. بس كلامك صحيح 100%. البيج داتا هي اللي هلا صارت ماخذه، هلا صار يسموها داتا ساينس وداتا مانجمنت، وكله صار هلا علم مس انفورميشن، علم كبير يعني.
لهيك صراع كبير بين الصين والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية على ال 5G وحتى الحديث عن 6G.
وصار صراع كبير بين الأردن، بين اليابان، بين الصين وأمريكا، صراع ضخم جدا. ولليوم ما وقف، عشان البيج داتا اللي موجوده بالصين. انت اذا عندك سامسونج اليوم، السامسونج مسجل كل المعلومات اللي عندك اياها عند الصين. الصين اذا بدك تعرف عن دكتور وليد وهو عنده تلفون سامسونج، كل المعلومات وكل اللي بيحكيه وكل شيء موجود عندهم بيقدر يطلوه. هلا الامريكان بيقدروش يطلوه، ليش؟ ما عندهمش شركه سامسونج موجوده سيرفراتها بالصين. ولكن اذا انا عندي ايفون، انا مثلا عندي ايفون بستخدم جيميل، كل ايميلاتي وكل شيء موجود عند الامريكان، سواء انا هذه هي الداتا، الحرب الداتا اللي صايره هلا حاليا. وطبعا هي مميته، هواوي صار ممنوع بامريكا نهائيا. والايو هلا عملت شيء اسمه اللي هو القانون للداتا، القانون تبعهم كثير قوي، فصعب انك تدرس هاي المعلومات تعملها، او الدراسه تعملها بالاوروبا صار صعب جدا، بيقبلوش انك تعمل دراسات زي هيك.
دكتور اياد،
روان هبوب رافعه ايدها من فتره، سوري دكتور بعتذر، بس هي لها فتره عم تستنى، بنقدر ناخذ السؤال تبعها.
شكرا أستاذة رولا. So Dr. Iyad, you were talking about AI. How do you control what the machine understands? Because you give them a big chunk of data, and then this data, they have to understand it by themselves. So you don't know what the machine learned itself. How would you control what it learns and how it's going to develop it?
So the machine is learning according to the data that you are giving it. So, and you are requesting. So the machine, the AI, the purpose of the AI is prediction more than it is other purposes. Until today, they are doing it for prediction purposes, to understand and to predict the situation that what will happen. What is 50% will happen as a percentage. So if you have a rate that says that 80% today is going to have like the car jam in this area is going to be very high. So this is at 80% rate. You understand and take a decision whether you go through this area or not. It's at the end, it's a humanistic decision. But the AI, people misinterpret the AI that it can't take the decision for you. It does not take the decision for you. It predicts the decision. It's a different aspect. So the prediction, this is what people are working on. The prediction, for example, the failure of a heart surgery. The AI can predict, according to the information given about a person and his health condition, how much percentage he's going to live after this procedure. So if he's not going to live for 2-3 days or 1 month, they will tell you the best not to do the procedure. So it's a prediction process and not a process to take a decision for you. So I hope I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes. Yes, but there are some specific cases, especially it was used in the US for the payroll prediction. So who's most likely to get again convicted and who's not most likely to get convicted. So they're giving them payroll, and then it has been proved that it also has some prejudices. And for example, people with Latinos, colored people are having less chances because the AI is giving some different predictions. So how do we control this kind of prediction? At the end, we as humans are going to take the final decision, but we're taking also the predictions from the machine itself.
Of course, yeah, this is the AI. So if you, for example, I understand you very well. There is a new example that I saw 2 days ago. I think where I saw it for maybe for Professor Lina when he was, the black people do not do, the white people in the US do more criminal acts than the black people for racist acts. So the prediction stated, everyone thought that it was the black people and who are doing the criminal acts, but the higher percentage were the white people who are doing the, so now this kind of the prediction, you understand even that you don't like the black people and the reputation of the black people and you know, the Latinos in America are criminals because the media states that the criminality comes from there. The AI stated no, it's 60% from the white. So this is also, the data cannot lie. This is also, it's another issue. So when I put that I am black in the data, you are black person. So this, you cannot say, maybe if he's gray, there is the minimum of error in this case is very low. So this is what happens. That's why the prediction you can depend on the prediction on the percentage, and you can see that the percentage is very high or not. But that to be biased, it's very difficult to be biased because you can write, I am black or I am white, or I am gray or I am brown. And then when it does really, there is an error, it's correct, but the error is very low, like 1%, 2%, 3%. So our error, if you ask me, I would think the black person, from my deep instinct, is a criminal, or he might become a criminal. But from the data, the white people are more criminal than the black people in the US. And this was a really very big debate about it. So all the laws and the police, you know, fighting the black all the time. And still today, even that the AI states otherwise. So it's also about what is your conviction. So the data is very, very hard to be biased unless you do wrong data. So we have, if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. This is what said to me actually. If you put garbage in, garbage out, so you didn't get the wrong data. So the data has to be very well studied. And not, that's why when they ask you to fill in a form or something, they want something tangible that you cannot make a mistake. But the error is there, it's always the error is there. But according to bias studies done by the UK, the bias are stating that are very low, 1% to 2%. And some people say the bias can be overcome very quickly. So this is how AI is moving very fast to giving predictions and percentage of analysis. I hope this is, so at the end, it's the humans. Either they say yes and they do a mistake, or they don't do a mistake. The decision is yours. As long as the last decision is a humanistic decision, the AI is not making the decision until today. And this is what, you remind me of this police that they now put on radio, how the London people are sad or happy by using the recognition of faces. So if 70% are sad, they will tell the people of London today are sad. Please be happy. So this changes people, but maybe not all of them are sad or happy, but it changes. It's a kind of prediction. I don't think it will.
وليد المدلل دكتور تفضل.
يعطيك العافيه دكتور اياد. انا سؤالي انه انت عملت دعايه كثير كويسه لان فيفو يعني.
شكرا كثير لك بروفيسور.
سؤالي انه يعني ايش الليميتيشن؟ ايش جوانب القصور في الان فيفو لاي باحث يريد ان يعمل يستخدمه في يعني في عمل البحوث يعني.
جوانب ايش بروفيسور؟ جوانب ايش؟ ما سمعتش مني، عندي الكمبيوتر واطي شوي.
the limitation of the study or using in vivo in research.
ان فيفو في كثير مشاكل بالان فيفو. صعب اول شيء، not friendly user، ومش وغالي مش رخيص. هذه في شغلات يعني. بس في اشياء سيئه فيه، انه صعب تو اندرستاند. الشيء السيء اللي فيه انه انت لما انا استعملته لازم انت تدرس النظريات. اللي بيصير مع كثير ناس انه ما بدرسوا نظريات علم التحليل، واللي بيصير انه بيصير يستخدمه من غير ما يعرف ايش النظريات. هلا هو شو عامل بالضبط عشان الكواليتيتيف اناليسيس؟ كريبندورف بكتابه حاطط انواع التحليل. ان فيفو بيعتمد البرو سوفتوير نفسه انك انت محلل وفاهم ايش عم بتسوي وايش اللي بدك اياه. هلا اذا انت مش محلل ورحت عليه والبيج داتا ومش دارس عمليات التحليل، بصير عندك مشكله كبيره اللي صارت معي، ما بتقدرش تفهم الداتا. ولكن هذا اللي بيصير مع كثير ناس اللي بيستخدموا ان فيفو. ولكن اذا انت درست علم التحليل بصير عندك انت بروبرتيز، قوائم ايش بدك تسوي، بتروح على الان فيفو بتلاقي انها موجوده نفس الموجوده بالكتاب. بس اذا ما انت درست الكتاب ونزلته بصير معك هاي المشكله، وهي صارت المشكله معي، وانه غالي كثير. عندي اليوم طلاب استعملوه، طلاب الجامعه الاردنيه استعملوه، من 8 طالبات بالماجستير وطالب، ومشكلتهم كانت واحده بس اللي قدرت تعرف من ال8 طلاب كيف تستعمله بطريقه ممتازه جدا. كانت اخذت الكورسات كلها اونلاين. وهذه يعني هو معقد، السوفت وير مش سهل، بس اذا واحد عرف له بيقدر يحلل كثير اشياء فيه، بيساعد على تحليل. وكمان عنده شغله اللي مش موجوده بباقي السوفت ويرز اللي الفيجواليزيشن. الفيجواليزيشن صارت كثير مهمه اليوم، انك انت بدل تحط يعني داتا من غير فيجواليزيشن الناس بتنام وبتبطل تطلع عليك. يعني هو الاخ الكوليك تبعي استخدم اطلس ما في الفيجواليزيشن تبعته نقاط، ولكن هذيك تبعت انفيفو بيعمل تشارتس. انا كنت افرجيكم لسه اكثر تشارتس. انا عملت تحليل ل 250 نيوز ايجنسي اللي كانت تكتب على الشغال البروجكتس الريكونسيليشن اللي كانت تتسوى بين الفلسطينيه والاسرائيليه، وكان بدنا نشوف هل لها علاقه بالريكونسيليشن ولا لا. طلعنا فيها انه بال 250 نيوز ايجنسي اللي كتبت على المشاريع انه مثلا بيحكوا على البيس ولا لا، قديش هل في كروس بيناتهم. هاي الشغلات يعني الكروس طلع عندي بين 3 شغلات بين ال 250 ارتكل، انه كلهم طلع اكثر شيء البيس والريكونسيليشن والمودريشن مشبوكين مع بعض بنفس المحادثه مع كل الناس اللي اشتغلوا بالمشاريع. هيك بصير انت عارف انه المشاريع بتحكي كلها عن دراسات معينه. فهو الانفيفو فيه سيئاته انه صعب جدا وبدك تدرس علم التحليل، بس تقدر تدرسه يعني اتس نوت ذات هارد. يعني بدك تفتح على اليوتيوب وتدرس علم التحليل اول شيء عشان تعرف ايش كيف تطبق فيه. بس لما تاخذ ايدك عليه شوي شوي، يعني هم عاملين، يعني انا ماخذ كورس انفيفو اكسبرت ولسه مش اكسبرت وماخذ الكورس كله كامل. يعني انا اقول لك صراحه السوفت وير مش سهل، ولكن السوفت وير بيساعد في عمل الابحاث. كثير منيح لعمل الابحاث يعني جدا، بطلع لك ايش انت بتفتش عليه. الهدف منه انك انت تدرس الهايبوثيسز والبروبلم اللي انت عملتها، الثيمز، وبعمل كودينج كاتيجورايزنج، بيعمل يعني غصب عنك بيساعدك. هذا اللي حلو فيه. بس صعب.
ليش بعض الاكاديميين يعني بما فيهم الغربيين يعني لا يشجع على استخدام الانفيفو؟ يعني بيعتبروا بعضهم، يعني قال بالعباره، قال اتس رابش يعني.
هذا هو كله يعني بروفيسور. غير باليوكي اقول لك صراحه، بامريكا بيعتمدوه، لطلاب الماجستير. انا شفتها بالمانيا بيعتمدوهوش، دير بالك المانيا مش موجود. المانيا موجود عندهم شيء ام اكس كيو دي اي. بقطر بالدوحه كانوا يستعملوا الانفيفو، لقوه كثير معقد وقالوا لي عم نستخدم ام اكس كيو دي اي. يعني هذه طلبوا مني اعطي محاضره، قلت لهم انا بس انفيفو، بقدرش اعطي الا انفيفو، بقدرش اعطي ام اكس كيو دي اي. هلا طلع ام اكس كيو دي اي اسهل، واطلس اسهل واسهل. بس اذا بدك ايش كومبليكيتد اند رياليستيك وبيقدرش حدا يجاوبك، انفيفو از كواليتيتيف ريسيرش انا تول. هو صعب، وطبعا ما بحبوه، في ناس ما بحبوه عشان انت عم بتحلل من غير ما تستخدم المحللين. وهيك برضه انت زي عم تقصي مجموعه من الناس، زي ما حكت روان، انك انت بتقصي مجموعه من الناس، يمكن يكون عندك التحليل تبعك بايست ومش مزبوط. هذه طبعا في مشكله بتصير دائما. فانا بقول لك الصراحه انا استخدمته، والانفيفو كثير قوي بطريقه يعني رهيبه، قوي جدا. مش سهل السوفت وير. مشكلته انه ليس سهل استعماله، ولكن النتائج الذي يظهرها نتائج قويه جدا في البحث.
جميل، اشكرك.
دكتور اياد، ومعنا سؤال من دكتور ايمن. دكتور ايمن معنا؟
نعم. يعني اياد دائما انت بتاخذنا لنيو فرونتير يا اياد، يعني النيو دائما التخوم الجديده دائما موجوده. بشكرك اياد يعني على هذا العرض فيما يتعلق بالميثودولوجي ديزاين في الكوانتيتيف والكواليتيف. هلا انا اللي فهمته اياد من خلال الكودينج انت موجود في الميدان طبعا للكواليتيف ديزاين، وفي هناك individual responses. هذول الانديفيدوال ريسبونسز انت بتعطيه الكودينج او ترميز. ف بعرفش هون يعني زي يعني صار intervening with the quantitative design. طب ما هو نروح للكوانتيتيف ديزاين ونخلي الكواليتيف اياد في التراديشنال واي، انه بيلدينج ارجيومنت وكاونتر ارجيومنت، ممكن تاخذ سايتيشن وتحلل. يعني تراديشنالي، بتعرف التراديشنال واي اوف اناليسيس في الكواليتيف ديزاين، يعني انا برايي ما زالت هي المعتمده اكثر. especially we are dealing with human beings, we are dealing with emotions, we are dealing with cultures, we are dealing with behavior. وهذا صعب تعطيه كود معين يعني يكون فيكس وثابت. وبالتالي انا برايي في هناك ليميتيشن، يعني استكمالا لسؤال البروفيسور المدلل، في هناك ليميتيشن لعمليه استخدام يعني النيوميريكال كودينج في الكواليتيف ديزاين. وبالتالي ربما انا بفضل اني اروح للنموذج التقليدي اللي هو هيجل. بتعرف هيجل اعتمد على نظريه الثيسيس والانتي ثيسيس والسينثيسيس، انك انت بتجيب ان ايديا، بتجيب كاونتر ارجيومنت and on the basis of that you can construct يعني a new argument in the right direction. ف بعرفش يعني if you can comment on this point دكتور اياد.
الله يخليك بروفيسور، انا فهمت بالضبط اللي عم تحكي. انا ما عملت كوانتيتيف ولا كواليتيف، انا عملت ميكس ميثود. سو ميكس ميثود اللي هو اكثر بدخل بالبيهيفير مع ميكس مع كوانتيتيف وكواليتيف. وزي ما شفت في 3 انواع introduced by شو اسمه باي جون سيرسويل. وبقدر انا اشاركك لو بشارك هاي الباوربوينت عشان اجاوبك على سؤالك اول واحد اللي هو على البيهيفيرز. الان فيفو الكواليتيف والميكس ميثود تقدر تطلع شيء اسمه بوزيتيف ونيجاتيف وتحطهم هذول الكونتينر الكودينج يكون بوزيتيف ونيجاتيف، وانت تحلل المشكله اللي بتصير معك باللي انت اللي بتحكي فيه. ليش نقلوا على الميكس ميثود وليش نقلوا هذا الديزاين؟ انا لما احكي بحكي عن 80,000 داتا سيتس او 100,000 داتا سيت، انت بصير الاولد واي اناليسيس اوف كواليتيف اند كوانتيتيف ما بتقدر تعمل 20 واحد. هلا ما حدا بدرس 20. اللي بيجي بيعمل بحث وبقول انا درست عن 20 شخص و30 شخص شو عملوا، بيعمل سيرفي، هذا صار براكتس، ولكن هذا بصير مو ريسيرش. كانوا تعملوا ماسترز، بس عندنا اذا بدك تيجي تعمل بي اتش دي مثلا تحكي انا درست 30 شخص ما بردوا عليك لسبب واحد، بدك تشتغل 100,000 شخص. هلا كيف بدك تحلل 100,000 شخص والبيهيفير تبع ال 100,000 شخص؟ هلا هم يعملوا هون مثلا بيحكوا اللي انت بتحكي عنه، فعرضوا لك البوزيتيف ونيجاتيف كودينج وهون حطوا لك ناتشرال كودينج. هي للاتيتودز سموها اتيتودز، هون سموها ناتشرال انفايرمنتس مثلا. هذا وبوليسي كمان. يعني هم حللوا الكاتيجوريز وعملوها زي ما انت بتحكي، زي ما انت سالت، عشان يقدروا يحللوا كميه عدد كبير هائل من الداتا. المشكله لما يصير عندك داتا ساينس، لما احكي داتا ساينس انا بحكي 100,000 رو، 100,000 او مليون. انا اللي حللته بالويب سايت مثلا عندي كان 2.5 مليون فيزيتورز. طب كيف انا بعرف ال 2 مليون سايتس فيزيتورز شو هم درسوا؟ بقدر اشوف عدد الارتكلز اللي انفتحت، قديش انه اكثر ارتكل انقرأت، بيطلع لي اكثر ارتكل انقرأت. اوكي عرفت انه ارتكل انعكست عليها. هلا بجيب الارتكل هاي، بدرس الارتكل، بطلع انه اكثر كلمات موجوده بهاي الارتكل عشان افهم عدد الكلمات. ما عندك 250 ارتكل مثلا بالويب سايت، كيف تقدر انت تعرف بالويب سايت اللي عنده 250 ارتكل ايش الارتكلز الاكثر اللي كانت مش بس كبس عليها، كبس يعني اللايك والكبس ما بهم اكثر انه على ايش هم كانوا يحكوا الارتكلز نفسه. هلا بهذا عنده طلع برضه، هذا طلع عندي عمل لي تشارت، كتب لي كل ارتكل كل شابتر قديش عدد الناس اللي قرأته، نسبته، وبصر شو كل شيء عنه. طبعا انا لما حللت هاي التحليل صرت اعرف انه هاي الارتكل توجه عليها اكثر وعليها اكثر قراءه واكثر ناس في عليها بيهيفير، فبقول انا عم بعمل ترانسفورميشن، عم بعلم. اما اذا جيت اعمل انترفيوز واعملها اللي هي طريقه طلع هيجل مش صح طبعا 100%، بس انت بدك تبني عليه زي ما انت حكيت. الطريقه اللي انت حكيتها ممتازه، ولكن بدك تعملها ل 100,000 بني ادم، ل 100,000 رو مثلا. هذه هي القصه. ليش هم وصلوا لهي المرحله؟ عشان عندهم 100,000 رو. اخر شيء بقدر اقول لك اللي هون اذا بقدر اوصلها، بعرف اذا بقدر، اللي هي هذا نشوف اذا بنقدر نوصلها وهيك اسرع شوي. وين هي كانت موجوده؟ هون شايف، هون انت زي ما تشوف هاي التحليل انا عم بحلل 100,000 شخص في هذا التحليل. يعني انا شو بدي اعمل انترفيوز لهم مثلا، او بدي انا عامل كثير شغلات. طب انا كيف بقدر اطلع ايش الداتا عم بتصير؟ يعني هون انا عملت بالضبط للتحليل ماب تريز، وعملت وورد كاونتس، عندي يعني وورد كاونتس طلع مثلا الناس عم تحكي عن الحرب مثلا، تعرف انه الارتكل هي عباره عن تحكي عن الحرب، مش ضروري تقرا الارتكلز. كثير بقى الليترشر ريفيو اليوم تقدر تسويها عن طريق الاناليسيس، انك تحط الكتب والانترودكشن تبع الكتب وتطلع بالضبط الليترشر ريفيو تاع الكتب. هذا الانفيفو كثير برضه مشهور فيه انه بيعمل الليترشر ريفيو، هيك انا بحط لك اياها اسهل شوي. هلا هون الديزاين للميكس ميثود، انت اللي حكيته بروفيسور عن كواليتيتيف وكوانتيتيف، انا بحكي عن الميكس ميثود. الميكس ميثود انه الاثنين مع بعض، ولازم تحكي عن شيء لما قبل ما تعمل ميكس ميثود واي يسموها ذا انتنت of integration of qualitative and quantitative. عندي داتا ماخوذه من فيسبوك بيجز وعندي داتا ماخوذه من وين؟ من الويب سايت. فعشان هيك صار عندي ميكس ميثود انتجريشن للداتا كلها، ولا بقدر اجي انا اعمل انترفيو لداتا معينه ل 20 شخص 30 شخص. وكمان نفس الوقت اذا انا بدي اعمل داتا للانترنت، هلا احنا مزبوط بتحكي انت، بس بدك تعرف انه ديجيتال ترانسفورميشن صارت مهمه هلا، بطلت زي قبل. شوف اذا في وحده ثانيه، هي هاي اللي كنت انا بدي بس اشرحها، اللي كومنت على اللي انت قلته. يعني انا اللي عملته مش كواليتيتيف ولا كوانتيتيف، انا عملت ميكس ميثود ريسيرش ديزاين. وطبعا البروسيس اللي استخدمتها لجامعه نبراسكا، جون سيرسويل من اشهر الناس في العالم في بناء الميكس ميثود ريسيرش ديزاين، كثير شاطر، عنده الكتاب مشهور هذا 2014، وعنده كتاب الثاني بال 2000. انا استخدمت 2014 و2017 و2018. انا ما بحبذ واحد يستخدم 2014 اذا هو بالبدايه في الميكس ميثود، عشان اذا انت رحت استخدمت 2018 معقد شوي. هو ورك شوبس، بس ورك شوبس كيف تبني الديزاين. طالما بدات الديزاين بتطبقه، ولازم تطبق الديزاين. بقول لك على نظريه، ولا اذا عندك النظريه عملت عليها الميكس ميثود ديزاين وبعدين عملت البراكتس، طلعت الداتا، هذا كله بصير عندك ريسيرش كامل موحد، وبصير عندك الفاليديشن. ولو كان اعداد الطريقه اللي عم نستخدمها احنا اليوم عشان الداتا ساينس بحكي على اعداد هائله. هاي المشكله.
Okay, thank you Professor Iyad.
Thank you Professor Ayman, it was a pleasure.
الله يرضى عليك.
شكرا كثير دكتور إياد. بعرفش إذا في حدا بحب يسأل آخر سؤال. أظن فيش حدا عنده سؤال. فبنهاية اللقاء بنحب نشكركم جميعا ونشكر دكتور إياد، شكرا كثير لك، وبروفيسور مارتن thank you. I don't know if he's with us or not. Thank you very much. وبنشوفكم الأسبوع الجاي يوم الخميس الساعة 4 مع دكتور أيمن. راح يحكي دكتور أيمن عن المقاومة الشعبية ودورها في حل الصراعات. فحتى ذلك الحين راح نزودكم بالقراءات، يعني أكيد دكتور أيمن راح يبعث القراءات منتصف الأسبوع، راح أبعث لكم إياها. وحتى ذلك الحين بتمنى لكم أسبوع جيد، وشكرا كثير لكم ولمشاركتكم.
شكرا لكم، شكرا لكم كثير، انبسطت أنا والله.
شكرا ريما، شكرا للمترجمة ريما، بحب أشكرها على ترجمتها معنا.
أنا كان حكيت عربي بس المشكلة كان البروفيسور لاينر موجود وقلت لازم أحكي بالإنجليزي، والآن سيرولا قالت لي أحكي بالإنجليزي عشان هي عم تسجل الريكوردينج. أنا عشان هيك حكينا بالعربي هالمرة.
اوكي مش رولا، احنا لقاءنا السبت، لقاءنا السبت ولا لا؟
ب3/4 مش متأكدة أي يوم. بس هو
مش الخميس،
يوم السبت. اوكي خلاص دكتور، شكرا لك.
شكرا كثير لكم.
يعطيكم العافية.
الله يعطيكم العافية.
باي.